Like many of us here, I watched the Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Ford hearings a few weeks ago, and my feelings were probably like many of yours, a mixture of grief, outrage, genuine surprise, and impending distress. It was hard to believe just how callous people could be to a survivor, and I know that for many of us here in particular, that raised up and reopened new wounds. One of the most surprising parts of the whole thing for me, though, was just how unwilling many people were to believe Dr. Ford. Certainly, if we respect statistics, we would know that claims of assault are almost always true. 98% are accurate. This alone would logically warrant that any claim be taken seriously, especially when so many people come forward. The accounts are logically consistent, and the people making them are doing so at great personal cost. I was talking with one of my good friends that week who was raised in a more conservative home. She'd watched many of her relatives post about the hearings on Facebook. It was like peering through the looking glass. Instead of feeling empathy for Dr. Ford, they identified with Justice Kavanaugh. They suggested that liberals were only going after him because they wanted to protect a Supreme Court justice seat. Another liberal witch hunt, ignoring both their own party's unprecedented roadblocking of Merrick Garland and the uncomplicated confirmation of Neil Gorsuch earlier in this term. One theme was especially curious about these posts, though. It was that liberals didn't actually care about the truth. That even if Kavanaugh had done it and apologized, liberals would still want to stop him. The implication was liberals were forcing him to be dishonest, because they wouldn't accept him even if he told the truth. They were putting him in a lose-lose situation. Let's put aside the question of why anyone would still want a justice on the Supreme Court who had admitted to multiple instances of sexual assault. Let's also put aside the idea that a nominee for Supreme Court isn't responsible for the claims he makes under oath, or that he could be so easily peer pressured into lying. What these folks seem to be saying is that for liberals, apologies don't matter. That for liberals, once you are guilty for life. Guilty in a way that dismisses your humanity and cares little for reputation and livelihood of those they condemn. Liberals in this worldview are heartless and vindictive, especially these days towards men, who, as our president has said, should be worried. So today I want to talk about this, because it's more than just about Kavanaugh and Ford. It's about how we understand our actions, both as individuals, how our intentions are as individuals, and how we want our society as a whole to be. So first, I would say this. The conservatives have me pegged, at least in one regard. Even if Brett Kavanaugh had come out and apologized, I would not want him on the Supreme Court. Not because I disagree with his judicial philosophy, although I do, but because it's hard to trust apologies by themselves. Don't get me wrong. Apologies are a beautiful thing. They open doors for healing, for redemption, for rebuilding trust, and for deepening understanding. They signal to the hurt person that their hurt is real and legitimate, that what was done to them was wrong, and pushes back against our culture of gaslighting. That can be life-changing in any context. And I believe that even on a national level, full of cameras and 24-hour news. Apologies can be genuine and heartfelt. But even if apologies open the door for those beautiful things, in order for that to matter, the apologizer has to walk through those doors. Apologies are the initial opening line to what should be the beginning of something far greater: growth, reflection, and change. Our society, and even what we teach our children, it puts apologies on a pedestal where it can erase all wounds and cure all wrongs. When I was a kid, I used to be told, just shake hands with someone after an argument, as a way of signaling that things were going to be fine. We've worked it out, it's okay. It was a ritual to affirm the earnestness of our sorriness, but not surprisingly, was often done begrudgingly and without sincerity. I can still remember how reluctantly limp the other kid's hand would feel, and the look on their face about being forced into such an artificial act of contrition. So when we lift up apologies and apologizing as the premier form of conflict resolution, handshakes or otherwise, what we are really trying to do is fix the problem and the emotions as quickly as we possibly can, limiting disruption and conflict and tension, and convincing ourselves that if we just say the right words, things will go back to normal and we can forget things happened. Sometimes that works. Sometimes the problem is small enough that affirmations of goodwill on either side and acknowledgement of wrongdoing is all that it takes. If that kid stole my baseball and gave it back, that's okay. But there are bigger issues in this world, more monumental hurts. And in those cases, apologies barely register for the injured person. Simple apologies, the kind that we're taught in school, favor the perpetrator because it allows them to continue on, feel better by just uttering a few simple words. It reinforces the status quo and those in power because it requires no real change or effort on their part. When, like with Kavanaugh and Ford, like with so many other instances of serious hurt, the pain and the harm is so deep that apologies feel deeply inadequate, a tiny gesture in proportion to the sin that they are attached to. Even worse, there's often a sense of entitlement attached to it. Look, I've apologized, so I deserve forgiveness. I've passed this social contract that we've all agreed upon. And all the while, this just shows a lack of understanding about the seriousness of the impact of the action. A true apology is never a ritual act. It is not a recited liturgy that we say in church or to ourselves. It does not absolve us. I would have loved for Kavanaugh to have apologized, to have acknowledged the toxic pattern of behavior that he has had throughout his life. But I would have loved more for him to commit himself to change. On my Facebook wall during that week, there was a striking post that I presume went viral because I had seen it in multiple different people's postings. And it was entitled, "The Right Answer from Brett Kavanaugh." Maybe you saw it as well. I'm not sure who wrote it, but I want to read part of it. It suggests an alternative universe, when Kavanaugh said the words that could have led to actual healing. Now, this is edited slightly to highlight specifics that I think are most important. Here's what he could have said. "I am so incredibly sorry for the pain I have caused, that this memory would be with her after all these years. I'm ashamed when I look back. I have deep regrets. That's one part, the apology. It's good, but it's not enough. Here is the important and often overlooked part that this viral meme included. From now on, I will be part of the solution so that my daughters don't have to grow up in an environment like my high school. I will do whatever it takes to change the way young men and young women come of age in this culture. That's the part that I want to see, because it shows real understanding. It shows a real commitment to change, not only for oneself, but also for the world. Because if you are truly remorseful, then you understand what went wrong, and you feel it deep in your heart, and you want to make sure that it not only doesn't happen again for you, but for anybody, because that hurt and harm is real. Brett Kavanaugh did not say this. But even if he did, it doesn't mean he should be confirmed. Even when we receive a deeply sincere apology, even when it includes a commitment to change that is real, it doesn't mean that we must or should forget what happened to warrant that apology. When I think of the conservatives worrying about Kavanaugh being condemned, not only as a judge for the Supreme Court, but also as a human being, and when I hear worries about people's lives being ruined by accusations, I hear the fear that liberals want to anoint themselves as moral arbiters, as judge and jury and executioner, who rule favorably only to those who favor their policies and identities, who trust certain people more than others, and have come to dictate the words that we can and cannot say, with drastic consequences for those who refuse. The fear is that in a liberal's world, people are punished ruthlessly for simply being themselves, for offending someone in an in-group, for not towing the line, without any hope of forgiveness, mercy, or consideration of their humanity. So I think it is important to be clear that as a liberal place, these fears are not legitimate and they are overblown. Not only does it equate serious charges of abuse, like those of Dr. Ford's, to political partisan wrangling, it suggests a fundamental misunderstanding of the liberal ideal. The kind of liberalism that we stand for here at Fourth Universalist is not about control or denial of a person's humanity. Accountability here for one's actions does not suggest a lack of grace. We take seriously, even in the hardest cases, like with Kavanaugh, our first Unitarian Universalist principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That means that he has it too, no matter what. I would never want to deprive him of that, and I don't think any true liberal should either. But what the right doesn't seem to understand is that you can hold people accountable for their actions while still honoring their humanity. This is not a zero-sum game. When I used to work with special needs children, we had a mantra: we will still love you. We will always love you. But if you act out, there will still be consequences. In congregations, we all come here to be accepted and understood. But if one of us is acting in a way that hurts another person, we have to tell them that while we love them, certain behaviors can't be tolerated. It's not about them as a human being. It's not about their inherent worth and dignity, but the actions or behaviors that they are taking. We have to learn to be okay separating the person from their actions without suggesting that one isn't responsible for the other. In that space between, there is accountability, because those two things, the person and the behavior, are connected. But also there's opportunity for forgiveness and redemption and transformation, because although they are connected, they are not the same. That's because in that space in between, the separation, the truth is that no matter what we do, our humanity is always there apart. And that lets us start anew and again and inspire different ways of being for the better. It's what we say every Sunday during our prayer: there's always another day. It's what we say and why we champion people who have been formerly incarcerated, because there's always hope for redemption. And that's true for Brett Kavanaugh, and it's true for each of us who have all done things we regret. You and I and everyone here. To hold ourselves and one another accountable is not to be mean, it's not to be punishing, it's not to say that someone is bad or that their human worth and dignity does not matter. It is only to acknowledge that there are certain ways that we want to be together. Some might suggest that this code of conduct that we are forming is too strict in this world. But really, I think it's quite simple. It's something most of us learned in kindergarten and probably well before. It simply asked us to answer the question, do we play well with others? If we do, if you do, then we can offer welcome and say, come on in. If you don't, if you hurt others, if you make others uncomfortable or disregard their feelings, put your needs above others, then we'll ask you to think about it. Recognize the harm you're causing and do better. Not because you aren't worthy of love and acceptance and compassion, but because we all deserve to live in a world where people are good to each other, where we feel safe and treated well and cared for. That's true in places like this, but in the world out there as well. You can tell a good apology because it turns the perpetrator into a humble ally who wants to listen, to understand, to change, both as a person, but also change our world that is so full of hurt to make sure that the harm that they cause does not happen to other people. So may we, in our time and in our turn, offer good apologies ourselves. May we honor them when we receive them, and may we insist on them when we do not. May it be so, and amen.